Welcome to the Real Life Podcast at Hermitage Hills, where we have real honest conversations with real people about topics relevant for today. At Hermitage Hills, we desire to see people experience life change through Jesus Christ. For more information about our church and how you can be a part of the community here, visit hermitagehills.com/connect.
Hey, thanks so much for joining with Aaron and I today on this version of our podcast, Real Life, Real People, Real Impact. Aaron, thanks for joining me today on Real Life. And you have a great story. A lot of people have great stories, but you have a great story that I've come across. And so I'm gonna kind of start us off, kick us off with the beginning of this story, because really this story started with Julie and I at a luncheon, and then you all came into the picture a little bit later.
That's right.
We went to a luncheon. What was the name of the group you told me?
Small World Adoption.
Welcome to the Real Life
Adoption.
Podcast
So
at
Small World
Hermitage
Adoption's
Hills,
called
where we have honest
me.
conversations with real people about topics relevant for today. At
Probably,
Hermitage Hills, we desire to see
2016.
people
Yeah.
experience
Early
life change
2016.
through
2
Jesus
years
Christ.
ago,
For more information
and they said
about
they're
our
gonna
church and
have
how you
what
can
they
be a
call
part of
a
the community
reverse
here, visit
mission trip.
hermitagehills.com/connect.
And they said, we have 10 children in orphanages in China, and we're going to bring them to America, and we want you to come hear about the story. So my wife Julie and I went to the luncheon and sat with some people at a table and had a great time, great conversation. And in the center of the table was a picture of one of the children. And so as the luncheon went on, they explained what they were doing. They were looking for churches who would partner with them, who would have host families from their church, who would host these children. How many days was it? Do you remember? Was it 10?
It was about 2 weeks.
Yeah, about 2 weeks
they were
long.
here.
The children would be here. There'd be many things they would be doing. They'd have the children checked out medically, and they were going to show them around, let them see parts of Nashville, and also build relationships with some of these families. And so we said, wow, that's awesome. So there's 10 kids. And so I came back and started sharing with the church about this reverse mission trip. And but during that lunch, I don't want to forget, during that lunch, the child we had at the center of our table was a cute little girl. And they turned to us and said, we want you all to do two things. We want you to give this child an English name because she doesn't have one. And we want you to pray for this child. We want you to pray that the trip will be safe and that while they're here, possibly she would find a forever family. And so we did that. So we prayed for her, and we gave her the name Ruth. I remember that.
Remember why you gave her the name Ruth?
It was just a Bible name.
Yep.
Okay. We said, let's pick a Bible name for this child, so we picked Ruth. So anyway, story goes on, and we brought this back to our church and asked for host families, and you and Lindy were one of, was there 4 or 5?
I think we had at least 4 that were part of our church.
Yeah.
At least 4.
There was 4 families, but had 5 kids, right?
Correct.
Because the Kinzers had 2.
That's right.
They brought in. So there was 4 families and 5 children. So half of the children were
with
connected
us.
with families in our church.
That's right.
So we were excited about that. And the church was excited about that. And we didn't know what would happen. We just wanted to see what God would do. And so I'll never forget when the children came, and then you all got our Ruth, what we call our Ruth.
Right.
At that time, and all the other kids, and we're so excited to see that take place. But Ruth,
And they brought them right from the airport here to our new student building upstairs, and that's where many people were introduced to these 10 children for the very first time.
I remember the big foyer. Everybody was in the big foyer, and the
That's right.
kids were meeting their new homes they were going to stay in for a couple of weeks. And the people were so generous. They had gifts for them, but these children, like Ruth, didn't even speak English, or very little English, as I recall. Is that right? Do I remember that correctly?
That's
Did she
right. I don't
speak?
believe any of the children spoke any English whatsoever. So, we had some that were, on the younger side, maybe 3 years old. I think was probably the youngest, and then others that were older, around 11. But even the 11-year-old, that boy, he didn't speak any English at all. So no English.
Now, as I understand it, each of the children had some kind of medical concern that I remember to some degree. and they were all in orphanages in China. And were they all from the same orphanage? I know
They were not.
Okay, but the ones
were
that
not.
connected to our church, were they all from the same orphanage?
A few of them were.
Okay.
A few of them were. So not all of them that came here. We had 5 children that came here, but those 5 children came from 2 different orphanages.
Okay, all right. But some of them were in the same orphanage, beds close to one another, which is kind of neat. We'll go on
That's
further
correct.
into the story.
That's right. 3 of them were.
So these families come together, and you get the one we call Ruth at that time. I don't. Did you all call her Ruth when she came, or what name did you all call her?
No, we wound up using a kind of a Chinese nickname that they had for her, which was Tian.
Okay.
So that's what she kind of responded to, and we did our best to pronounce that as well as we could. But no, we didn't actually use that the English name that was given to her, but it was still unique to have that connection point, right? And to have that even before. And interestingly, in parallel, and we'll get into some of this, I think, as we talk through the conversation, we, as you were reached out to be a part of the luncheon and to see what that opportunity held and how Hermitage Hills could invest in that opportunity and help shepherd these children to come here and all the things that you said they would be doing, we were also being kind of brought into that as well, separately, because we had a prior relationship with Small World Adoptions, right? Because we had adopted through them before, and they reached out to us and said, hey, would you be interested in being a host home, right? And we'll get into some of that, but so kind of the story unfolds in multiple ways and multiple pathways, and then kind of comes together later.
Yeah. So the real story and the real life and the real impact today is this subject of adoption. And so let's go there, because you kind of led us to that place where you had adopted before, right? Sam?
That's right.
Okay. And so how long ago was that before?
2012.
Okay. All right,
2012.
so a few years before this.
Yep, 5 years prior.
You had Sam, who's an incredible kid.
That's right.
Man, this guy, he's active. He's ready to go.
He
I
is.
love seeing him on the move. And so tell us that. So with that adoption, give me some thoughts about you and Lindy, Gavin, and your conversation there's the 3 of you, and then you're looking at adopting Sam. So we'll come back to our Ruth in a minute. But,
absolutely. But
tell us that road. What took you there?
Sure, and it's such an important part of our story, leading up to how these additional 10 children came from China here. And we adopted Sam in 2012 from China. So we had the opportunity to walk that process and understand, what were our personal reasons, for going through the adoption process, and then making the decision to, either adopt domestically. There's many opportunities to do that, or adopt internationally. And we chose to go where we felt there was just a real need. There's a need everywhere, but there's a huge need at the time, and even still today, in China. And so we felt called to go to adopt from China. And anyway, long story short, we went to China, we adopted Sam, and what we found out from that process was there was a family that was from Florida, here in the United States, and had decided to change everything and be missionaries and move to China and start what they called a healing home there.
Wow.
For pulling children in that were in orphanages across China into their home so that they could minister to them both from a health and wellness perspective, but also from a spiritual and heart help perspective. So they had built this great facility there, had over many years created such a wonderful place to nurture kids, and they were on the other side of the world, yet they're from Florida, right? And so we got to meet them, and that's where we wound up getting Sam from that particular place. And Sam's nurse, Sam was very sick when he was young, and we really believe had he not been in the hands of this couple and their facility and a specific nurse who is from Murfreesboro, that Sam would not have made it through his first few years of life. And we got him just before he was 2 years old.
Okay.
So adopted through there, but it's amazing that the size of the world, we could go from here, Nashville, to China, and yet still encounter people doing the Lord's work from Florida and from Murfreesboro, and how they could impact our lives.
So tell me what moved you and Lindy to consider adoption? I mean, some families find that hard to grasp.
Yep.
Some families would love to and haven't been able to do it, and it's
That's right.
everybody in between, right? So, but your story, what is your story that moved you all? You had Gavin. What moved you to have, if I can ask?
Yeah, absolutely. No, we're an open book on that. You know, there's so many reasons why people consider adoption. Some people just grow up having a heart to do that. They grow up saying, one day when I'm able to have kids,
I've talked to people like that.
I may do that,
Yeah.
but I'm also going to go and adopt. And I may not know how I'm going to do it, domestic, international, whatever,
Yep.
but I know I have a heart for adoption.
Yep.
I think that's a wonderful story. That wasn't our story. We had Gavin. He was, our own biological child. And as we sought to extend our family a few years after having Gavin, we ran into a lot of infertility issues and battled that for about 2 years.
Yeah.
And really just got to a point where Lindy and I just felt like the options for us to continue down this pathway is probably not gonna get us where we want to be.
Right.
Do we go with something like in vitro fertilization and incredibly expensive thing to go and do,
Right.
and not a lot of success. It takes multiple tries sometimes to do that. And we looked at adoption and those sorts of things and thought, this looks like something that would work for us. But I'll tell you, it was a real journey for us. It wasn't like we just woke up one day 2 years into our infertility journey and said, you know what, let's adopt.
Right.
It was this slow, gradual kind of feeling it out a little bit, having a lot of conversations, doing research. And Lindy, she really kind of led that effort for us. And then we got to a place where we felt like this is something we would do. And so we started talking to different adoption agencies that were near here in Nashville, and then some that were a national organization, and then ultimately made the decision that this is how we're going to extend our family.
So back to the story of our Ruth. So you're at the beginning when they said, hey, would you host? We have a child coming in, would you host? And you said, yes. Now, what were you thinking at that point when we said, hey, could you host a child? And y'all said yes. What were you were thinking what at that time?
I knew what was happening. We had been talked, with Small World reached out to us in advance as they were reaching out to you and other churches to help in the program. And our motivations were to help in the 2-week process.
Right.
I
remember that.
We said, we've been through this process before. We know Small World. We adopted through them before. They're a wonderful agency. If we can help by opening up our home for 2 weeks, and we have, a deep love for China, an affinity for China, having adopted from there before. So our motivations were, well, let's help.
Yeah.
We can do this for 2 weeks. It'll disrupt things, but it'll be fun and interesting, and we should say yes, if only to just be the Lord's hands and feet and help. Right. That was our motivation.
So when you picked her up, met her, picked her up, and you took her back to your home just to help out for a couple of weeks and let this child get some medical attention, let this child meet some things, see some things she'd never seen before, and then maybe, who knows, in the community would meet her and possibly open up their home to be her forever family. So you're just trying to help that out. So you take her home. She speaks no English.
That's right.
And she's from China. And how old is she?
She's 3.
She's 3 years old. Traveling halfway around the world.
And had never been on any public transportation.
Right.
Never been on a train.
Yeah.
Never been on a plane. Never been in a large passenger van or bus that shepherds you from the airport here.
Yeah.
Never experienced those things. Never seen people that look like us, right? Or other people of color, other people of ethnicity.
Yes.
Not seen any of that. 3 years old.
Wow.
Completely uprooted, and had been in an orphanage her entire life.
So how did that go when you got in the car and you went home with this child? Tell us, how did that go for her, for you all? Those kind. I know she's always been a sweetheart that I've seen, but but
Yeah.
the language barrier and all that. Tell me a little bit about that part of the journey for the couple of weeks that you had her.
Well, it's a challenge for anyone, no matter
Yeah.
how much you're prepared. And I think what you try and do is just put yourself in the position of that child in as much as you can.
Yeah.
And say, they got to be scared to death. And we saw a little bit of that because as we left here, we spent, as all the children, all 10 children were brought here to Hermitage Hills, met their host families, had some discussion, and then everybody left to depart to go home. And it was late. It was about 9 o'clock at night,
Yes,
if I remember.
I remember that.
And everybody left, and Smart World had a great program set out for 2 weeks, so we had a schedule. We knew what we were doing. We needed to have her back to certain places. They were going to go to a pumpkin patch and do all these different things. However, what happened for us when we said, hey, everybody's leaving, let's go home, we were walking out to the car, and she lost it.
Yeah.
She absolutely lost it because she was afraid.
Well, sure.
She didn't know who we were. She couldn't understand anything we were saying.
Right.
And we had Sam with us. We had Gavin with us. And as much as being around other children will help, it doesn't completely make things okay.
Right.
So she was very much afraid.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it was kind of a scary situation of how do you comfort, how do you tell her things are going to be okay when you can't tell her things are going to be okay in a way that she can hear it and internalize it. But you do the best we can. We got home. You communicate as best you can through hand signals. We had some things that we had printed, little cards and things about, do you need to go to the bathroom?
Yes.
Do you need to eat? Are you thirsty?
Yeah.
All those sorts of things. And we know a little bit of sign language to help with some of those things as well. So we thought maybe some of that would help. Maybe that she had learned some of that. Turned out she had a little bit. So we just tried to communicate on her level as best as we could, and be quiet, be careful, just try not to be too loud and disruptive and all those things. And
because Americans are pretty loud people. I found that. I didn't realize that, so I started traveling on mission trips to other parts of the world, and those loud Americans takes on a meaning.
Yeah.
Because we don't realize that. We've just kind of grown up around it. But you go to other places in the world, in restaurants or places, and there's this loud, boisterous American people, and I don't think anybody's trying to be ugly or anything. They're just being themselves, different culture, whatever. Right. So I get that going, like, we're just trying to keep things.
And then the complexities of where does each child sleep? How do you deal with that? What happens in the middle of the night if they wake up and they're scared or they don't even go to sleep? What happens if they don't go to sleep? How do you handle just all the things that you got to do? You think about everything that goes into the day-to-day.
Yeah.
Now, how do you do that differently given the new situation over the next 2 weeks?
Yeah. So as you recall, it's been some time, as you recall those 2 weeks, what were some of was there any special moments? Was there any times you could sit back and go, wow, this happened or that happened, or we felt this, or Gavin said this, or anything like that you can recall?
We had a lot of fun those 2 weeks. I took a little bit of time off of work, and Lindy would, with the rest of our family, take Ruth to all the different places that we had going on, and I would try to do different things when I could. I can't pinpoint any one moment that was overly meaningful, except for towards the very end, where we were, I think, a day and a half, maybe 2 days away from all of the 10 children having to go back to China.
Right.
They're here only temporarily.
Right.
And us sitting around the dinner table like we do pretty much every night, and we're all eating, and at this point, she's very comfortable with us, not talking at all, in Chinese at all, in any language.
Right.
No verbal communication whatsoever, but we had gotten some chuckles and some laughs and a few little things here and there that let us know that she felt a little okay with us.
Yeah.
But we were sitting around the dinner table, and we were talking about the fact that she had to go back to China, that all of the kids had to go back to China, and that ultimately we wanted them to be adopted. And our oldest child, Gavin, our biological child, he said, well, why can't we adopt her?
Out of the mouth of babes, huh?
That's right. That's right. And, what had happened in those 2 weeks, I think that Lindy had spent a tremendous amount of time with her. And
well, I had to.
That's right. I mean, she was her caregiver.
Yeah.
Completely,
Yeah.
24/7 for those 2 weeks. And I had been afforded the opportunity to spend time with her as well. And we both just fell in love with her.
Yeah.
Just absolutely fell in love with
She's
her.
easy to do
and I
that
think
with.
as God was softening my heart for adoption again, because there's sort of a story about just with Sam and how difficult that adoption was for us. And when we came home, just some of the things that we had to deal with medically and that thing, I was scared to death to adopt again.
Yeah.
And parents and other people that we knew would commonly ask us, hey, are you going to go back to China and adopt again? And it got to a point where it almost became hurtful to me personally, because I wasn't in a place where I could do that. I couldn't say yes to an adoption anywhere just because of the tremendous leap of faith it took to do it the first time around.
Right.
And we had a wonderful adoption. It was amazing. Sam's a awesome little dude. But it was really, really hard. And going over to China and seeing that situation was just heartbreaking. And I just wasn't sure I could do it again. But when we went through this process, this 2-week process, I don't think it took long for Lindy to fall in love, but it took me a little while, and God really was softening my heart through that process.
Yeah.
And I think part of our story through those 2 weeks, and even the 2 years leading up to those 2 weeks, was God saying to me personally, this is my plan for you, Aaron, and your family. And if I can't get you to go to China to adopt again, I will bring a child from China to you.
Wow.
And
Wow.
then that's what really, moved me in a very personal and deep way to get to a point where we would say yes to something like that.
So from the 2 weeks that she was with you all to the place of seriously considering taking this step, seeking the Lord's guidance in that, I can't remember how much time that was.
It wasn't much time at all. When we had to take her back to Small World at 4 o'clock in the morning on a Friday morning, if I recall correctly, to put her on a bus.
What was that
have her
like?
go back to the airport.
Yeah.
And then back to China.
Yeah.
It was real hard.
Yeah.
It was hard. We had made the decision, not only me personally and not only Lindy to adopt, but as a family, we had decided to do this. We had internalized that. And that morning, when we dropped her off at 4 o'clock in the morning, we turned in our paperwork to adopt her.
Oh, really?
We had filled it out. We turned in the application, and we told Small World, we said, there's no question about this.
Uh-huh.
So we felt she was our daughter.
Oh, wow.
Already.
Yeah.
Before we had gone through the next process of the actual, adoption and going back to China for a second time, we felt like she was our daughter. And I remember Lindy sitting in the parking lot on the ground, still dark, 4 o'clock in the morning, just holding her.
Oh, wow.
Not wanting to put her on that bus, but having no choice.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how quickly God can soften your heart for something like that.
Oh,
and you
yeah.
can feel such a draw and such a need and such a deep connection to somebody that's irreplaceable.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of Real Life, a ministry of Hermitage Hills. If you'd like to be a part of a community seeking to follow Jesus and experience life change, visit us at hermitagehills.com/connect. You'll also find ways to ask for prayer and how to take the next steps in your faith journey. We'd love to partner with you as you grow in your faith and experience real life.